Well, good morning. My name is Joe Krolikowski. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today. This is IATF Rules 6th edition overview of key changes. And we're glad that you're here with us today. A couple of notes for all of you. All of our participants today are on mute, but we absolutely want to address your questions. So we do ask, please utilize the question portion of the dashboard. We will address questions at the end of the presentation. One of the more common questions that we get is the presentation going to be available after we're finished? Well, we do make our webinars available in two ways. Firstly, if you'd like to get a copy of the slides, you can go to our website and look for the link past webinar slides. It'll be available there. And if you'd like to rewatch this webinar or share it with a colleague with the voiceover, it will be posted to our YouTube page. And again, you can find the link for that on our website under the link past webinars. Now, if you've got any questions on this, you can go ahead and reach out to our marketing team at pjr@pjr.com. Now, our topics for today, we're going to be going over what is the IATF Rules 6th edition and who is responsible for enforcing it. We're going to address what it has to do with you and your company. We're going to have an overview of the major changes that impact certified clients. I'll have a couple of concluding remarks and then your questions. So IATF Rules 6th edition is a publication of the International Automotive Task Force, or IATF, as the title would imply. Now, they are responsible for two key documents, among others, that impact automotive quality management system certification. The first of these you're hopefully well familiar with, the IATF 16949 standard itself. This is obviously the primary document, along with ISO 9001, that you are held accountable to in your audits from the certification body, PJR in this case. And then we have the IATF rules. Now, the rules are the primary document that PJR is held accountable to as an accredited certification body. Now, the official title of this document is Automotive Certification Scheme for IATF 16949, Rules for Achieving and Maintaining IATF Recognition. It is now in its 6th edition, so we will be referring to this document throughout our presentation as Rule 6th. Now, in terms of who enforces these requirements, there are 5 official oversight offices that are tasked with enforcing Rule 6 for the various certification bodies. Now, here in the United States, the assigned oversight office is the IAOB. So obviously, PJR's accreditation is issued through the IAOB. Now, what does all of this have to do with you and your company? Well, the rules impact your certification in a number of key ways. They inform things like audit duration, whether or not you're eligible for certification in the first place. They establish timelines for submission of information for when certain events have to take place. Now, with the Rules 6th edition, IATF has introduced a number of changes, and a lot of these changes are going to impact you. We feel that all of our clients are going to be impacted to some degree by the changes from Rule 6th edition. Now, Rule 6th edition compliance became mandatory on January 1st, and if you need to get a copy of it for yourself, it can be acquired by visiting the IATF's website at iatfglobaloversight.org. Now, we're going to be going over the major changes that came about from Rule 6th edition. And these can be broken down into 4 primary categories. We have changes that impact eligibility. We have changes that impact planning and timelines. We have changes that impact audit duration. And lastly, we have changes that impact the process for responding to a nonconformance. So let's begin with eligibility. Now, a key thing about IATF 16949, and this goes back to when it was originally known as TS 16949. It was always intended to be exclusive to companies that manufacture a product that's used in the manufacture of an automobile. Now, the older versions of the rules had language about this being applied to heavy trucks, to motorcycles, etc. In Rule 6, they've introduced some key verbiage changes that are intended to provide some clarity on what types of products are IATF 16949 eligible. To begin with, they have introduced a term, and that term is homologation. And this is used in Section 1. In Section 1 of the Rule 6, that says that only organizations that manufacture and, where applicable, design and develop automotive products and vehicles are eligible for IATF 16949 certification. They then go on to say automotive vehicles means homologated vehicles intended to be driven on public roads. Now, homologation itself is defined in Section 10 of the rules, where it says that this is the whole vehicle approval process that results in a government-issued certificate allowing a vehicle to be sold in a particular market. So, bottom line with this, if the vehicle is primarily intended for public roads, so this is going to include cars, buses, motorcycles, heavy trucks, etc., all of the parts that make up the manufacture and assembly of that vehicle will qualify for IATF 16949 certification. Now, you'll note that this is going to exclude things like construction equipment and farming equipment and those sorts of things, because those are not primarily intended for public roads. The term automotive products is also defined, and this is a key definition here. It's defined as the parts, including those with embedded software and processed materials, which are manufactured to an automotive customer's specifications and are integrated into the automotive vehicle during its manufacture. Now, these are typically referred to as production parts. Now, that term processed materials gets some attention as well. This is usually going to refer to bulk materials that are used in the manufacturing process. Now, this can include ingots, filaments, sheets, resins, etc. Now, it's important to note that raw material acquisition is excluded. So a mining operation, an excavation operation, etc., not eligible for IATF 16949 certification. Now, automotive products is also understood to include parts manufactured to OEM specification that are procured or released by the OEM and integrated into the automotive vehicle after its manufacture and before or after delivery to the final customer. Now, this statement means that aftermarket products are now eligible for IATF 16949 certification, and that is a big change because aftermarket products were prior excluded. They were called out as not being included. Lastly, automotive products is also understood to mean replacement parts and materials for automotive vehicles, including remanufactured parts. Now, these are typically known as service parts. So what's eligible for certification? A lot of stuff. Production parts, processed materials for production, service parts, and aftermarket parts. There's a lot more stuff that's eligible for certification than there had been under Rules 5th edition. Now, some of our clients, our current clients, are in a situation where they are manufacturing both production and aftermarket parts. Now, previously, organizations were allowed to excuse the aftermarket product lines from their assessments during an audit. It is now clear that if you manufacture both production and aftermarket parts, it's mandatory that all of your automotive products be included in your IATF 16949 assessment. And that is going to be our expectation beginning with any audit conducted in this year and beyond. Obviously, this new language also means that if you exclusively manufacture automotive products, you are now newly eligible for IATF 16949 certification. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about extended manufacturing sites. Now, this was one of the more dramatic changes that was brought on by the Rules 6th edition. Previously, an extended manufacturing site could be pretty much anywhere, as long as it met the eligibility requirements. They have changed that. They have indicated that an extended manufacturing site can be no more than 10 miles from the manufacturing site it supports and no more than an hour's drive from the manufacturing site that it supports. Additionally, there's some new language pertaining to management personnel who happen to have their office at an extended manufacturing site. This is actually kind of a helpful little change that they've made. It says that management personnel may be located at an extended manufacturing site, provided that these personnel are responsible for controlling and managing their relevant area of responsibility at both the main site and the extended manufacturing site. So in other words, they're not quite as hung up as they used to be on where people sit. So those of you that have an extended manufacturing site, you can rest easy on that particular point. Now, if you have an extended manufacturing site on your current certificate that is more than 10 miles and or more than an hour's drive from your main facility, we actually have a small number of clients where this is going to be the case. You basically have two choices. You can transition the extended manufacturing site to a full site certification, potentially as part of a campus scheme with the existing site, or you can remove the extended manufacturing site entirely and operate it as an uncertified facility. As long as you don't have a customer that's telling you that extended manufacturing site has to be certified, you obviously do have the option of removing it from your certificate and contract. Now, when we start reaching out to you for your 2025 audit, we will expect that you'll have made up your mind on how you wish to proceed with your extended manufacturing site that no longer qualifies. Let's shift gears now and talk a bit about planning and timeline expectations. This is probably, in terms of the aggressiveness of the changes, this is definitely the most aggressive of the areas that we have seen. So to begin with, you are going to be required to confirm your audit arrangements within a 90-day window. Now, this is a very tricky requirement in how it's been written. It's found in section 5.7, and it states that the actual dates for your audit have to be confirmed no less than 90 days before the required end date. And that's a very key bit of wording there. It's actually tied to a requirement from section 511, which establishes requirements for audit scheduling. All requirements in terms of the timing of your audit stem from the end date of the most recent stage 2 or recertification audit. Now, surveillance windows have to fall within a 6-month window, 3 months prior or 3 months after the end date of the last stage 2 or recertification audit. For recertification audits, it's a 3-month window, the due date minus 3 months. So for example, if the last recertification audit concluded on September 9th, 2024, the surveillance audit must conclude sometime between June 9th and December 9th, 3 months prior, 3 months afterward. However, and this is the key here, PJR must confirm your surveillance audit 90 days in advance of the due date, which means that the audit arrangements must be made no later than June 9th. And that is the case whether the audit is taking place in June, July, August, September, etc., all the way through December. So when your scheduler is calling to make an audit arrangement, you need to make it, because otherwise we're going to be in violation of the rules. Another important one, providing pre-audit planning data. Now, all of the versions of the IATF rules have long required that you provide certain information, customer scorecards, headcount information, KPI, performance data, etc., in advance of the audit to enable the audit team to be prepared for the audit and develop their audit plan. Now, in the past, if we weren't given that data, we did have the option to add additional on-site audit time to give the auditor a chance to review that information just before the audit takes place. Well, unfortunately, under Rule 6, that permissiveness has been removed. Effective this year, if we do not receive the required pre-audit planning information at least 30 days prior to the start of the audit, we are required to delay the audit. Now, in most cases, we won't have an available auditor to delay your audit for a short period of time. And if it's delayed too long, it may lead to a loss of certification. So bottom line, if we don't get that pre-audit planning data from you, we may end up with no choice but to revoke your certificate. So again, when you are contacted by our office with a request for the pre-audit data, please act on it, because we are required to hold you accountable to that 30-day requirement. Now, one little change that was made, we are no longer required to suspend your certificate for failure to perform the surveillance on time. So on time in this context means that it ends no more than 3 months prior or 3 months after the anniversary date of your last stage 2 or recert audit. However, if your surveillance audit does not take place on time, if you go past that 6-month window, we are required to revoke the certificate. So the end result is the same, but you won't have the warning of being suspended first. We have to go straight to revocation. So the penalty is as severe as it was before, unfortunately. Now, I've got kind of an elongated section here on support locations that work with other certification bodies. Now, the IATF rules mandates that when there is a support location, PJR is required to audit the relationship from both sides. In other words, if you have a remote office that provides product design services to you, we have to audit the product design activity at your site. We have to see, okay, how does this design office provide you with information, and what have they provided you recently, etc. And we also have to go and audit the design office itself. We have to visit that design office. Well, some of our clients, not too many, but some of our clients have support locations that have IATF certification through another certification body, whether it's DECRA or NSF or Smithers or whomever. So in those situations, we are required to work with the audit report that's prepared by that other certification body. And that audit report from the other certification body has to be consistent with what we are seeing in our audit. In other words, if the other CB's report only lists product design support, but in our audit, we're seeing product design support, purchasing support, warehousing support, etc., that's going to be a problem. And or if the audit report from that location doesn't mention our client, doesn't mention anything, that they're not even listed as a supported location. Now, in the past, if the audit report wasn't usable, we were allowed to go do a separate audit at the support location ourselves in order to make sure that the support was assessed. Well, unfortunately, that type of arrangement is no longer permitted. So what Rule 6 says now is if we can't use the report from the other certification body, we have to delay our audit. And as I mentioned earlier, if we delay the audit, it may lead to a situation where we have to revoke the certificate. So again, we need you to act on these requests when we make them. If we tell you that we need you to reach out to your partner company and have them act on a request to get an updated audit report, that needs to be taken seriously. Let's talk a little bit about what happens if there is a relocation. Now, Rule 6 has a new section dedicated to relocation, and it outlines that an initial audit, that's what it's referred to as, an initial audit is required for all situations involving a site, extended manufacturing site, or even a support location moving from one building to another. And yes, that includes moving across the street. Now, initial audit in this context is defined as including both a stage 1 and a stage 2 audit. So in other words, you're starting all over. Now, in the case of a support location, if it's a design office, a warehouse, what have you, we are allowed to exercise some discretion in the duration of the initial audit. But if it's a full manufacturing site, in almost all cases, we're going to be looking at the full thing, the full stage 1 and stage 2 assessment. Now, Rule 6, Section 3.2 makes it very clear that PJR must receive prompt advance notice of any plans for relocation or any other change impacting the IATF 16949 certification. One change that has been brought about by Rule 6 is that we do have a couple of options for remote audits. Now, in 2024 and earlier, remote audits had to be approved in advance via a waiver. Well, now in 2025 and beyond, we will be able to provide very limited auditing services, remote auditing services, without having to request a waiver. Now, there's a three-part requirement that must be met here. First of all, it has to be a support location, and a support location that has no product handling or design responsibilities. The audit in question has to be a surveillance audit, and the most recent surveillance audit cannot have been done remotely. So, in other words, you're allowed to have a qualifying support location be assessed virtually once every 3 years during the surveillance cycle. So it's not much of a window, not much of a permission, but it is a permission nonetheless. I will mention that remote audits are also possible in the case of a repeat stage 1 assessment in order to permit rapid review of missing or incomplete information. Next major change that we're going to talk about is in regards to audit duration. And there are many changes that were made that are going to impact audit duration and audit planning time. And these are most likely going to have an impact on the cost of your IATF 16949 certification. Audit planning time has been adjusted. Now, under the prior version of the rules, PJR was given a certain amount of leeway in how much planning time we would assign to enable auditor review of planning information, the KPI data, the scorecards, what have you. In clause 5.7, it mandates that each manufacturing site and support location get a minimum of half a day of billable offsite planning time. Now, if a site has a dedicated support location, we're allowed to treat that with a single pool of planning time. Now, if you are part of a corporate scheme, in most cases, we're going to be looking at a pool of audit planning time for just the support locations. Now, you will be expected to provide the pre-audit planning data for all sites and support locations. And the data that you need to provide for a support location will not be as extensive as what you need to provide for a site. Now, those of you that have been through at least one audit with us, you know about our audit planning checklist, the F108TS data. That has been updated to include new prompts specific to this change. Talking about corporate schemes, there have been some changes for clients who utilize the corporate scheme option. Now, a corporate scheme, of course, means that there are 2 or more manufacturing sites, possibly with 1 or more support locations, that share a common quality management system, an upper management team, and a central location. This is typically referred to as HQ. Now, the most important of these changes has been the elimination of the tiered audit time reduction table. Under Rule 6th edition, corporate scheme clients get a reduction of 15% and no more. It is capped at 15%, regardless of how many participating sites there are. If you have your Rule 6th edition, I would direct you to review the 3rd paragraph of Clause 5.3. Now, there's been some other adjustments in the audit time requirements, and some of these are going to mean more audit time for you. We no longer, as mentioned, have as big a reduction for corporate scheme. It had been as much as 40%. We even had a 50% reduction for a company transitioning from a letter of conformance. Now, both of those reduction allowances have been eliminated in Rule 6th and replaced with a maximum audit time reduction of 30%. Now, some of these are going to be familiar. If you don't design your products, you have a 15% time reduction. That hasn't changed. Corporate scheme reduction, 15%. Transitioning from a letter of conformance, 30%. Upgrading from ISO 9 to IATF, also 30%. The maximum discount is 30%. Now, that's going to be regardless of how many discounts you qualify for. You are capped at 30%. Another key change pertains to the time added for verification of prior nonconformances. Now, under the prior version of the rules, we were given some autonomy in how much PNCR time was needed. Under Rule 6, Clause 5.2.0, it is now mandatory for us to add 30 to 60 minutes for each minor nonconformance from the last audit. Now, that is, of course, unless those minors were verified at a special audit. Now, as prior indicated, in most cases, each site and each support location will be getting a minimum of half a day of off-site planning time. Also, our auditors were previously allowed to perform a 12-hour audit day to ensure shift coverage. That has been changed. Audit day duration is now capped at 8 hours. That means potentially that you're going to have more calendar days needed for your audit to be completed. If there is a team member, team members must provide a minimum of 8 hours as part of the audit. That was something else that was not specifically mandated before. Under Rule 6th edition, Clause 5.2Q, if you have an underperforming scorecard from an IATF OEM member, such as Ford, GM, BMW, etc., we are required to add 4 additional audit hours up to a maximum of 8 additional audit hours for each underperforming scorecard. Lastly, Rule 6, Clause 5.2G indicates that a minimum audit duration following all discounts is 1.5 days. So a minimum audit, and that's for a one-person company, if there is such a thing, is 1.5 days. Regardless of how simple your system is, how mature, your audits will never be less than 1.5 days. Now, one change that they've made is the elimination of the 1-hour pre-audit review. Now, if any of you on our call today have been through at least one IATF audit, you no doubt know what I'm talking about. When the auditor arrives and the review of the scorecard information, etc., prior to the opening meeting. It was positioned as a re-review to ensure that the pre-audit planning information was current and to give the auditor a chance to update their audit plan as needed. Well, Rule 6, Clause 572B has eliminated the 1-hour event, but they've replaced it with language calling for review of the same information during the opening meeting with management present. Now, we don't have official confirmation of this, but we presume that this has two intentions. Firstly, ensuring that management is committed to the success of the audit and is actively reviewing critical information such as scorecards, and also making the review of that information an actual part of the audit itself. Bear in mind that the rules mandate that an audit cannot be terminated once it has started without suspension of the certificate. So by making this a part of the audit event itself, that is a permission that's no longer in play. Our final category of change is changes impacting the process for responding to a nonconformance, whether it be a major or minor. We've only got a handful of these. If you have a major nonconformance, Rule 6, Clause 511.1 mandates that you have 15 days to provide your initial response. Now, that is calendar days. And this is going to include the correction containment statement, supported by evidence, your root cause analysis, and your plan for systemic corrective action. Now, prior versions of the rules allowed 20 days for this to be provided, so they've reduced it by 25%. Majors all require that a special audit be performed, and that's been the case all along. If you have a major nonconformance, it means your certificate is suspended and you have to have a mandatory special audit. Now, in the past, we were allowed to perform multiple special audits, so long as final approval was issued within 90 days. Unfortunately, that latitude has been removed. And in 511.4 of Rule 6, it states that the special audit is a one-time event. So if you have a special audit for a major and it doesn't go so well, we have to withdraw your certificate and you start over with a new initial audit. In other words, a stage 1, stage 2. So bottom line, if you have a major, be very sure that you're ready for that special audit because you only get one shot at it. If we are doing a special audit for a major and or minor nonconformance, just like most of the other activities, we've lost some autonomy in terms of the needed duration. Under Rule 6, Clause 522C, it is mandated that a special audit being performed to verify one or more major and or minor NCRs use the following time requirements: 1 to 3 hours for each major and 30 to 60 minutes for each minor. And that is regardless of what the NCR was written for. So when your auditor, or excuse me, when your scheduler reaches out and says the special audit is going to be a day and a half, please bear in mind that that is because the rules tells us it has to be. Some of you on the call today may have had an experience in the past with having a nonconformance be treated as open but 100% resolved. Now this protocol is discussed in section 511.3. This is another protocol that's had some changes under Rule 6th edition. Corrective actions have to be verified within 90 days of the end of the audit. Now, that's always been the case, and that's through correspondence in the case of a minor or through a special audit in the case of a major. If it is not possible for your corrective actions to be verified, could be you have training that you need to do, and the outside source has no availability within 90 days. Could be you have many items that need to be resolved. You could have 200 gauges that need to have an MSA study, and so forth. These are the types of situations that are treated as open but 100% resolved. It allows PJR to accept your response and perform a special audit to verify full implementation later. In other words, in excess of 90 days. Now, the big changes in Rule 6 are as follows. First of all, the special audit has to take place 90 days or more prior to your next regularly scheduled audit. We have to get information from you 30 days or more in advance, showing that you have implemented your intended corrective actions. And lastly, and just like with majors, the special audit is a one-time event and cannot be repeated. So again, make sure you're ready. I've got a couple of miscellaneous changes of note here. In 3.1H, it mandates that if a consultant is present or otherwise participating in the audit, we are required to terminate the audit. Now, it is noted that this includes both direct and indirect participation by a consultant. And yes, that includes texting. In Clause 5.1.1, it eliminates the possibility of a semi-annual surveillance audit. All clients must have surveillance audits once a year. Now, if you are in the middle of your surveillance cycle, let's say, for example, that you're due for surveillance audits 4 and 5 this year in 2025, you will be allowed to complete your surveillance audits and then transition to annual audits after your next recertification. Rules 6, Clause 6.1c mandates that PJR is required to collect a new application from our client if you are relocating or if you are reopening following a closure. Clause 252E mandates that PJR can no longer offer pre-assessment services for IATF 16949. Clause 6.1 presents a whole new list of required information that PJR must acquire to provide a prospective client with a quotation for certification. Now, among the things that are required, we have to have information on prior certifications that you've held, on your USI numbers. We have to get a copy of your interaction of processes map. We have to get a written declaration of your product design responsibility, what your intended scope is for all of your sites, past failed certification efforts from the prior 6 months, performance complaints from IATF OEM members, and any prior letters of conformance from the last 3 years. Lots more information. IATF Rules 6th edition is a very dense set of requirements. There's a lot of new stuff here. And again, this is going to impact, we feel, every single one of our current certified clients. We do hope that our presentation today is going to make you feel prepared and ready for the new expectations that are coming in 2025. I'd like to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. We have a special presentation on our Pro 3 and the right way to promote your certification. We have a presentation on your relationship with PJR. This goes over requirements related to change, as well as our dispute process. And we have webinars on a wide variety of other topics: Stage 1 auditing, process mapping, etc. If you'd like to be kept informed of the latest news automatically, the best way for you to do that is to visit our website at www.pjr.com If you go to the bottom of the page and enter your email address in the provided space and click subscribe, you will be opted in and you'll get updates on new webinars, changes to standards, and other helpful points of information. I do thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and unlock the question portion of the dashboard if anybody has a question today. As a reminder, our slides and the recording from today will both be available on PJR's website before the end of the day. Okay, well, I want to wish all of you a great day. Stay warm, and thank you so much.